In the spring of 2021, the rural municipality of West River began preparing its first official plan and land use bylaw. This presentation provides an overview of the latest versions of the official plan and bylaw based on the public feedback in March and is a summary of the information available at the April 26, 2022 open house. For today, I will give you an overview of the timeline and process, and then we will get into the zoning framework, present the zoning map, and provide some key highlights, ending with next steps in the process. Land use planning is the process of determining how a community wants to develop over time, including what to protect and what changes to promote, and then figuring out the policies and standards needed to achieve that. Since the March 2022 public meeting, the consulting team has taken what we heard from the public and prepared new versions of the draft documents. This slide illustrates the types of planning tools available to the municipality. The West River Plan sets out the vision for the community 15 years into the future, as well as the policies, goals, and objectives that guide decision-making over time. Every 5 years, the official plan is reviewed to make sure the content is current and meeting community expectations. The land use bylaw sets out the standards that put those goals and objectives and the community vision into action. In other words, the day-to-day rules about how land is protected and developed. The zoning map shows the precise location for where different categories of land uses are permitted throughout the municipality. As noted earlier, this is the rural municipality of West River's first official plan and land use bylaw. The planning process is a cycle of developing the plan and bylaw, adopting them, implementation, applying the policies and standards to applications for development, and making amendments over time where appropriate. The 5-year review begins the planning cycle over again. Since the March public meeting, the consulting team has taken what we heard from the public and prepared another round of draft documents, which were made public at the beginning of April 2022. This slide illustrates the public sessions and touch points the team has undertaken over the course of the last 9 months or so. In addition, the project website, the municipality's website, and social media has been used to regularly share information with the public. Residents were invited to reach out to the municipality for other ways to access the relevant information, particularly where internet access is a challenge. In March, the municipality also issued a mail-out to all registered property owners within West River. As we go through the following slides, we will provide another overview of the proposed approach and highlight changes made as a result of the feedback at and following the March public meeting. The Municipal Council developed and approved a vision statement, which we have drawn upon to create this community vision statement to guide decisions related to land use policy. In describing the West River of 2037, we are seeking to set out standards that balance individual use of land and meeting the needs of residents and property owners with the public interest of protecting the resource-based and rural nature of the community and the environment. The official plan outlines a range of goals covering economic, physical, social, and environmental priorities. The approach laid out in the plan focuses on protecting the valued community character, directing uses to specific areas in order to limit conflicts, providing opportunities for public discussion on more significant development, balancing flexibility with shared interests, and promoting safety and the protection of the environment, life, and property. Further, the official plan considers certain potentially more contentious uses through site-specific amendments, a process that includes public engagement. Importantly, existing legal uses may continue, even if the use is not a permitted use in the zone. The rural municipality of West River is a predominantly rural community, and we have created 5 zones to reflect this rural nature. The 5 zones are rural area, rural residential, commercial industrial, parks and recreation, and the environmental risk zone. We will discuss each of these, their purpose, and the permitted uses in the next few slides. Importantly, there are some uses that will be permitted in all zones: institutional uses, for example community centers, parks and open space uses such as trails, parks, and playgrounds, farm gate sales to support the local rural economy, and utility structures. We have also employed site-specific uses as a tool to deal with those unique situations where a use may be appropriate on the lot, but where the application should go through a public process to ensure the proposal is a good fit in the area. I will give you some examples as we go through. In this latest version of the plan and bylaw, the change in zone title from open space to parks and recreation was made as a result of public feedback. When you look at the zoning and future land use maps for the community, you'll see that the rural area, RA zone, is the predominant zone throughout the municipality. The focus of this zone is on primary resource industries and their activities, agriculture, fishing, and forestry. Commercial activities related to resource uses are also permitted, as are animal sanctuaries. Residential uses will continue to be common in this zone, including both single-detached as well as duplexes or semi-detached dwellings. We've also included small-scale commercial that is not related to resource industries, such as bakeries or certain tourism uses, limited by lot size for new parcels. Accessory uses are those uses incidental to the main use and include the list here, such as home-based businesses or small wind turbines for personal use. Dormitories are generally used for seasonal workers related to farming. In terms of site-specific uses, these are proposed developments that would have to go through a public process. We have included resource-related industrial uses, food processing plants, intensive resource uses such as hog farms and excavation pits, kennels, and large wind and solar energy developments. Where these are listed as site-specific in a zone, when such a development is proposed, it will be up to Council, with input from the public, to determine if it is to be permitted on the site in question. The rural residential, RR zone, is primarily for a range of residential uses. Permitted uses here are a range of housing types, permitted based on meeting minimum standards for lot size and service capabilities on site. Accessory uses like home-based businesses, sheds and garages, and secondary suites are also permitted. Site-specific uses in this zone include clustered housing proposals, such as vacant land condominiums, or conservation subdivisions, which involve small clustered residential lots on shared services, with 50% of the land base being permanently maintained as open space. These types of development are more intensive, but still reflect the desire of the community to maintain that rural feel. Based on public feedback, the RR zone has been changed so that it now applies to all residential lots of less than 2 acres. Any proposals for new rural residential developments would have to go through a public rezoning process. The commercial industrial, CI zone, includes properties that are currently being used for commercial or industrial activities. We have not pre-zoned any vacant land to permit such activity. As such, any new commercial or industrial use that is being considered and not already permitted in the rural area zone must go through the public process of a zoning amendment. Permitted uses are listed in this table and include a range of commercial activities, any residential uses, as well as some specific uses that tend to be common or controversial in other zones. Light industrial uses include such things as warehousing and manufacturing that does not involve excessive noise, smell, light, or other activities that may create conflicts with neighboring uses. Accessory uses are similar to other zones. Cannabis operations, or heavier industrial uses, are required to go through the site-specific amendment process, which again involves public consultation. The Parks and Recreation, PR zone, was renamed from open space. This zone covers those lands set aside for conservation or recreational activities. As noted in the table, permitted uses include historic and heritage uses, trails, pavilions, recreation facilities, and sports fields. These lands can be held privately or publicly, but are intended generally for public use and enjoyment without profit or significant impact on the land base. The golf course is considered a commercial use because of the intensive nature of the operation and because it is intended to generate income for private use. The disc golf course is more of a recreational activity, which is less intensive in nature. Accessory uses include buildings and concession stands, administration offices, and parking facilities. The environmental risk ER zone is a protective zone that is concerned with the safety of people and the viability of structures in flood risk areas, areas subject to erosion, and on contaminated sites. It is a protective measure for Cornwall's Wellfield, which is partially located within the municipality. It also includes buffers along wetlands, watercourses, and coastal areas. The proposed buffer of 60 meters along the Upper West River to protect a salmon spawning area has been removed in the latest draft. Permitted uses vary by what the development constraint is, with the ultimate goal being the protection of the environment and people in areas that could become or include hazards. As just mentioned, there are several types of development constraints captured in the environmental risk zone, and each type of constraint will be treated slightly differently. You can see examples in the slide images, where the ER zone includes the Cornwall Wellfield at the top, watercourses, wetlands, their buffers, and the projected flood risk for the year 2100. This flood risk is based on new provincial data. The following slides illustrate how the ER zone works in terms of buffers and setbacks from environmental hazards. As shown here, the ER zone is a 15-meter buffer from the edge of a watercourse or wetland. In the case of a coastal property, it is either 15 meters plus the zone setback or 60 times the annual rate of erosion, whichever is greater. These reflect provincial standards across the island. Where we have included the ER zone plus the building setback, provincial rules have a standard setback of 75 feet or 22.9 meters for all buildings. But the results are largely the same. There is also a vertical buffer for any proposed development below a minimum elevation, based on future flood risks identified by the province. Depending on the grade of the land from the coastline, the horizontal buffers established through the ER zone, and the required building setbacks in specific zones, the placement of new buildings below a certain elevation may also be restricted. This restriction is important for protecting against the potential hazards and risks to safety associated with erosion, sea level rise, and storm surges, as well as damage to property. If the flood risk area on a coastal property does not extend past the 15-meter buffer, the ER zone stops at the 15-meter buffer. Where there are flood risk constraints, there may be opportunities to engineer the site to raise the grade to meet the minimum elevation requirements outside of the ER zone, as shown on the graphic on the right. Using a site-specific amendment approach allows very specific uses on individual parcels of land through a public process for activities that have a greater risk of causing land use conflicts for adjoining properties or the community as a whole. Without this process, these specific uses would not otherwise be permitted or conform to the bylaw. Applications for site-specific uses go through a bylaw amendment process, which is public and approved at Council's discretion. Appendix C on this slide is an example of how site-specific uses will be tracked in the bylaw. Here is the rural municipality's future land use map, which sets the basis for and will be the same as the zoning map. The map illustrates the future land uses and identifies possible future community nodes with circles. These nodes will not be depicted on the zoning map. Changes to the map since the meeting in March include applying the rural residential zone to all existing residential lots of less than 2 acres, reducing the proposed 60-meter buffer on the Upper West River to 15 meters, capturing a missed golf course as commercial industrial, and a recent zoning amendment in New Haven, Riverdale. Aside from the permitted uses, one of the key areas that define the different zones are the subdivision standards for each. Given that the goal in the RA zone is to protect primary resource uses, a restricted number of new lots is permitted for each existing parcel. Specifically, the creation of 4 new lots will be allowed, with up to 2 of those lots being commercial. The proposed minimum lot size of 5 acres has been reduced to 1 acre. In order to minimize large-scale commercial uses not appropriate to rural areas, a 2-acre maximum will be established for new commercial lots. If more than 4 residential lots are desired, then an application will have to be made to rezone the area as rural residential zone. For the RR zone, 1-acre lots are again required, with smaller lots encouraged where shared water and wastewater services are provided. There is no limit on the number of lots in the RR zone, assuming that they can be serviced and accessed. New lots are also required to meet provincial regulations for lot size based on soil quality and based on their ability to site wells and septic systems. The CI zone rules limit the maximum lot size to 2 acres, and there can be up to 2 commercial lots subdivided off a parent parcel. Again, this limit is imposed to reduce the amount of commercial or industrial activity proposed in the region and push very large activities into municipal business or industrial parks, where they can be serviced and reduce conflicts with neighboring uses. There are no subdivision standards for lands in the Parks and Recreation Zone other than those required to accommodate on-site servicing. As noted earlier, home-based businesses are permitted in any zone where residential uses are permitted. They have been defined to limit what is included in them, so no auto sales or service operations, auto body shops, or car washes are included in the rural residential zone, as these uses can be more intrusive. Small-scale auto body shops in the rural area zone are one of those site-specific uses that may be permitted following a public meeting. Permitted home-based business uses do include short-term rentals and bed and breakfast operations. For those larger subdivision proposals, particularly those that fall within the rural residential zone, the municipality would require 10% of the land to be put towards a parkland dedication when there are 5 or more lots. This includes a change from the last draft, where parkland dedications were required for subdivisions of 3 lots or more. If there isn't an appropriate area of land for recreation purposes, council may take cash in lieu. This land, or cash in lieu dedication, must be for recreational uses such as parks, natural areas, trails, or the like. Private roads are a significant issue for the municipality. This map illustrates the network of both public and private roads, with over 80 kilometers of roadways privately held. As many former cottage properties are being converted to year-round residences, the official plan and land use bylaw do not differentiate between cottages and single detached dwellings. For all intents and purposes, those uses are the same from a regulatory point of view. In the land use bylaw, proposed standards include the following: no new or extensions to private roads, and all new roads and extensions must be public, meaning they are built to public standard and deeded to the province, who then becomes responsible for maintaining those roads over time. The number of panhandle lots that may be permitted where providing frontage on a public road is a challenge has been increased from 1 lot to 2. Another unique feature for West River is the Cornwall Special Planning Area, which takes in the areas in green on the map. The Special Planning Area has 3 main objectives: prioritize and protect resource uses, minimize the potential for conflict between uses, and limit unserviced development. In our proposed approach, the areas subject to the Special Planning Area and those beyond are treated in essentially the same way. This reflects the values expressed to us by the public throughout this process, being the protection of the rural character and resource uses, as well as the goal of bringing the various communities together under the umbrella of the new, larger municipality. Here we have addressed the 3 required special planning area objectives through limiting the size and scale of new developments with on-site servicing, limiting the overall number of lots in the rural area zone, prioritizing resource uses with caveats on permits, and addressing potential conflicts through the use of the site-specific amendment process. One difference in this approach for areas under the special planning area will be the requirement for subdivisions of more than 5 lots in the SPA to include shared services, which must be municipal water or sewer or both, in order to comply with the SPA regulations. Other changes made in response to public feedback include the removal of the requirement for permits for fences or pools, the removal of building height limits, the removal of height, size, and number limits for accessory buildings, and semi-detached dwellings will no longer be required to be built in such a way as to permit subdivision, although those standards would still have to be met in order to be eligible to subdivide down the road. Other resources and information now available include the survey summary report from last fall, a summary of what we've heard to date, the background report and municipal profile, and the watershed flood risk report. These documents, along with the latest draft official plan, land use bylaw, and proposed map, can be found at westriverpe.ca or planrmwr.ca. We invite public input on the latest draft documents until May 10th. After that, the team will compile the comments to prepare a draft of the documents that will go to a legal review. Once the review of the drafting is complete, the official plan and land use bylaw will be formally presented to the public at a statutory public meeting later in the summer. After the statutory public meeting, only minor revisions are generally made based on public feedback. Following any final revisions, the documents will be formally considered for adoption by Council and sent to the province for ministerial approval. As always, there are multiple ways to engage in the discussion, through the project website, by email, or follow along through our social media accounts. You can also reach the municipal office by phone. Thank you for following along. We look forward to hearing from you.